Hello, my name is Aaron, welcome to another video. Today we're looking at whether the Sony 16 to 50mm kit lens is good enough and whether you need to replace it or whether you can stick with it. So let's go over what I mean by a kit lens. A kit lens basically means a camera that comes pre-packaged with a camera. So for in this example, it's the 16 to 50mm kit lens which comes with Sony Alpha cameras. Now currently this is the lens you'll see pre-packaged most often with Sony Alpha cameras, so this includes the a5100, the a6000, the a63,000, the a65,000 and the newer a64,000. It's not always the case, and a lot of the time you'll get them body only, but this is the lens that I find seems to be pre-packaged with them the most. Now this lens costs about £200 on its own, but if you get it bundled with the a5100, for example, like I did, it's only £350 for the camera and the lens together. Before we get started on the pros and cons of this lens, if you're enjoying, please consider dropping a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Now this lens is a 16 to 50mm power zoom lens, meaning you can control the zoom from within the camera itself and also on the lens barrel. This lens also has optical steady shot OSS built in, which is Sony's optical stabilization. It means if you're taking video moving around, your shots will be less shaky. So let's look at the pros of this lens. The zoom range means it's versatile for many different types of shooting. It's wide enough to use for vlogging, for example, something like this. I'm using the kit lens now currently with the Sony a5100, so this is a good example of what it would look like. It's also wide enough for decent landscape photography as well. Of course, it also has the 50mm zoom range, which means it's also good for zooming in closer on a subject. As mentioned earlier, of course, this lens has optical steady shot OSS, which means it's great for vlogging, moving around. If you're, for example, vlogging walking down the street, camera shaking around quite a lot, is quite important to keep this video as stable as possible. So this is a really great, quite advanced feature for a cheapish lens, which is definitely worth considering when you're looking at upgrading, if you are looking at upgrading, because certainly not all third-party, well, hardly any third-party lenses and not all Sony lenses have optical steady shot built in, which means that those videos will be a lot more shaky. Now, for example, if you have the a6500, that has in-body stabilization built in, so a bit less of an issue if you have that camera body, but for all the rest of them it's a very important feature to have. Also, this lens has autofocus built in, and that will usually be the default set on your camera body. Some lenses are manual focus. Now you can swap this to manual focus within your camera settings if you are that way inclined, so it's nice that it can have both features, but as standard it is autofocus, which is pretty useful. You can select where you want to focus on, especially on the a5100 with its touchscreen capabilities, meaning you can point out on the screen where you want to focus on. And it seems like an obvious point, but this lens is very small. When the power zoom is not popped out, which it will be all the time when the lens is on, it compacts down into a pretty small size, meaning that the lens connected to the camera body can fit in a small bag or your pocket pretty easily. Very, very useful if space is a primary concern for you, because it means it's a lot more mobile. You can take it out on the street without carrying around a lot of bulky gear. We've had a look at some of the pros, so now let's have a look at some of the cons of this lens. It is not a particularly fast lens. This basically means that it doesn't perform quite as well as some other lenses would in low light situations. So if you're going to be taking a lot of video at night or photos at night, kind of city, street photography, which is maybe more focused around nighttime, you may see that you need to up the ISO a little bit, and it just might not be quite what you're looking for. However, for the price of this lens, especially it coming bundled, as I've already mentioned, the performance isn't too bad. It's just worth considering that it isn't absolutely top notch in that regard. Another point is that it is a very fragile lens. Now luckily enough I've not dropped this yet, but I have actually had to send this lens back for repair, luckily still under warranty, as it was having issues with the barrel coming out when being turned on. So this isn't ideal if you are going to be in a bit of rough and ready situation. I don't think this is a huge concern, but it is worth considering that other lenses might be slightly more durable, and I think it is because it has so many electronic moving parts with the power zoom and the lens is always moving in and out. It might be slightly more susceptible to breaking. Another con is that some of the shots might seem slightly distorted. If you do some searching online, people will say that there's some barrel distortion. I think this is a little overstated, but you will find that the shots aren't quite as crisp as you would get on, say, a much more expensive lens. This seems obvious, but it is worth pointing out that it might not be quite up to the standard that some people require. But overall, I think this is a really good lens, and I don't think people should feel ashamed using it or feel pressurized by what they see online to buy more expensive lenses. I think it's a really good all-rounder. The zoom makes it really versatile with what you're using it for. It's fairly wide, it's fairly good in low light situations, just maybe not compared to others. The zoom means that you can zoom in on your subject. It's really good for video like I'm doing now, and I still think it's pretty good for stills. Now if you know that you're going to be moving all the way to one or the other video stills, I think in the long run you are going to want a lens that helps you specialise a little more. However, for most things, and especially if you've got this camera, if you've got one of these cameras new with this lens, I would use it as much as you can and see how far you can push this lens before you upgrade, because it's easy to think, right, I've got a camera, people online say the kit lens isn't good enough. Well, it is good enough for a lot of things, especially if it's casual use, if you're using it for your Instagram feed, putting videos on YouTube and stuff like that. I think it's absolutely fine. You might not be able to push it as far as other lenses, but for the price, if it's bundled in with the camera body you've already got, you're going to have to be spending a lot more money to improve on it. Well, there we go. That's just an overview of the kit lens, whether it is still good enough or whether you need to upgrade. Hopefully this has helped you make a decision on this, and if you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time for another video. Cheers!